Appealing to authority means you use someone's opinion as proof, even if that person doesn't know much about the topic. This happens a lot. Think about a famous basketball player. They are an authority on basketball. If they say a certain shoe helps their game, that's fine. But if that same player tells you to invest in a specific stock because it will make you rich, that's an appeal to authority gone wrong. Their skill on the court does not make them an expert on the stock market. You might trust them because they are famous, but their fame doesn't mean their financial advice is good. Here is another example. Imagine a renowned scientist, brilliant in physics, starts talking about the best way to raise children. Their work in physics gives them authority in that field. It doesn't mean their advice on parenting is automatically correct or superior to anyone else's. Parents everywhere raise children, and their experiences are just as valid, if not more so, than the physicists. Yet some people might listen more closely to the scientist's parenting tips just because of their scientific background. Consider, if a doctor. Doctors are authorities on health and medicine. If a doctor prescribes you a certain medication, you trust their expertise. That's a proper use of authority. But if that same doctor starts telling you which car to buy, claiming it is the safest because they drive one, that's an appeal to authority fallacy. Their medical knowledge does not extend to automotive engineering or safety ratings. You should not pick a car just because your doctor recommends it. This fallacy can also show up in advertising. You often see commercials where a celebrity endorses a product completely unrelated to their field. A popular singer might tell you a specific brand of cereal is the best for your health. Their singing ability gives them no special insight into nutrition. People might buy the cereal because they like the singer, not because the cereal is actually healthy. The ad relies on the singer's general popularity to sell the product, not on any real expertise they have about breakfast foods. Even in legal settings, appeals to authority can be misleading. A lawyer might quote a well-known judge on a point of law, even if that judge's opinion is outdated or irrelevant to the specific case. The judge's past authority does not guarantee their past opinions are always correct or apply to every new situation. The lawyer relies on the judge's reputation to sway the jury, not on the strength of the legal argument itself. You might hear someone say, "My grandpa always said that putting butter on a burn makes it heal faster." Grandfathers often have wisdom from experience. But medical science tells us putting butter on a burn is not a good idea. While you respect your grandpa, his personal belief, despite his authority as a family elder, does not make the burn remedy effective or safe. You should rely on medical facts, not just on what a respected family member believes. In politics, a politician might argue for a new policy by saying, "A former president believed this was the right path." The former president's status does not automatically make their past beliefs correct for the current situation. Times change, new information emerges, and what was right before might not be right now. The argument relies on the authority of the past leader, not on the merits of the policy itself. An ad hominem attack occurs when someone attacks the character, motive, or other personal traits of their opponent instead of engaging with their actual argument. This fallacy shifts the focus away from the issue at hand and makes the discussion about the individual rather than the idea. The term ad hominem comes from the Latin phrase "to the person," which highlights that the attack is directed at the individual and not the argument they present. Imagine you're in a debate about climate change, and one person argues that more renewable energy should be used. Instead of addressing the points about renewable energy or climate science, another person might respond by saying, "Well, you're just an environmentalist, so you're not objective." This response is an ad hominem attack. It doesn't address the argument, but attacks the person's background or identity, implying that their position is biased because of their beliefs or profession. Another common example can be seen in politics. A politician might say, "My opponent's argument about healthcare reform is invalid because he's been divorced 3 times. Here, the argument about healthcare reform is completely disregarded, and instead, attention is diverted to the personal life of the opponent. This tactic avoids dealing with the actual issue and is meant to undermine the credibility of the opponent by focusing on something unrelated. Ad hominem attacks can be particularly harmful because they distract from the issue being discussed. If a person can't defend their argument, some might try to shift the attention to the person behind it, hoping to make the audience question their credibility. This can easily derail a rational conversation and lead to misunderstandings or emotional reactions. People use ad hominem attacks in various situations, especially in heated debates or conflicts. They can be seen in everyday arguments, from politics to social media discussions. For instance, if someone is defending their opinion on gun control and the other person responds with, "You just want to take everyone's guns away because you've never even been to a shooting range," they are not addressing the points about the policies or laws. Instead, they are attacking the other person's experience or perceived lack of knowledge. In some cases, ad hominem attacks are used deliberately to avoid engaging with a difficult issue. If a person feels unable to address the argument or doesn't have sufficient evidence to counter the points made, they might resort to attacking the opponent's character. It's easier to call someone unqualified or biased than to argue the facts, especially when they're in a tight spot. This can be seen in online discussions where people hide behind the anonymity of the internet to make harsh personal attacks, especially when they feel their arguments are weak. Ultimately, ad hominem attacks undermine meaningful discourse. They create a hostile environment where people focus on tearing each other down instead of having an honest discussion. They also make it harder for people to understand the true value of an argument because personal attacks cloud the issue. Instead of dealing with the facts, the conversation becomes about personalities, which prevents solutions from being reached. While ad hominem attacks are common in everyday conversations, it's essential to recognize them and try to steer the discussion back to the actual topic. When a speaker uses an appeal to emotion, they're trying to sway you by tapping into your feelings instead of giving you solid facts or a logical argument. Imagine a politician showing you pictures of sad, neglected animals to convince you to donate to their animal welfare bill, even if the bill itself has questionable financial details. They want you to feel pity and anger, hoping those emotions will override any desire you have to examine the bill's practical implications. This is a common tactic in advertising too. Think of those commercials for charities that feature somber music and images of suffering children. They are not presenting data on the charity's effectiveness or its financial transparency. They're aiming straight for your heartstrings. Another example is a lawyer in a courtroom who describes in vivid, heartbreaking detail the pain and suffering of a victim. While it is certainly important for the jury to understand the impact of a crime, if the lawyer dwells excessively on emotional narratives without also presenting strong evidence or a clear legal argument, they might be using an appeal to emotion. The goal here is to elicit sympathy from the jury, hoping that sympathy will lead to a conviction, even if the logical evidence is weak. Consider a parent who tells their child, "If you don't clean your room, you'll make me very sad and disappointed." The parent is not explaining the logical reasons for a clean room, like hygiene or organization. Instead, they're attempting to motivate the child through guilt and the child's desire to please them. The child might clean their room, not because they understand the benefits, but because they want to avoid upsetting their parent. In a sales pitch, a salesperson might say, "Imagine the joy your family will feel when they receive this gift. Don't you want to see their faces light up?" They are not focusing on the product's features, its durability, or its price point. They are trying to create an emotional connection, suggesting that buying the product will lead to happiness and positive family experiences. They want you to associate the product with positive feelings, bypassing any logical considerations you might have about its actual value or necessity. This approach plays on your desires for connection and happiness, aiming to bypass rational decision-making processes. Sometimes, an appeal to emotion can be subtle. A company might run an advertisement that shows happy, smiling people using their product in a beautiful, idyllic setting. The ad doesn't explicitly state that the product will make you happy or give you a perfect life, but the imagery and music are designed to evoke those feelings. You then subconsciously associate the product with those positive emotions, making you more likely to buy it, even without any logical reasons to do so. The ad wants you to feel good about the product, and that feeling is supposed to drive your purchase. The entire message is built on emotional resonance rather than factual claims. A false dilemma occurs when someone presents only two options as if they are the only choices available, ignoring other possibilities. This tactic forces a decision between two extremes, making one seem more appealing or unavoidable. It simplifies complex situations, preventing a full exploration of solutions or viewpoints. Consider a company facing budget cuts. The CEO declares, "We either lay off 20% of our staff or we go bankrupt." This statement creates a false dilemma. It presents two grim outcomes as the only path forward, when other options likely exist. For example, the company could explore reducing executive salaries, implementing a temporary hiring freeze, cutting non-essential expenses, renegotiating vendor contracts, or seeking new revenue streams. By presenting only two choices, the CEO attempts to push stakeholders into accepting layoffs as the necessary evil, rather than engaging in a broader discussion about financial strategies. Another common scenario arises in political discourse. A politician might argue, "You are either with us or against us." This statement immediately polarizes the discussion. It implies that there is no middle ground, no room for nuance, and no possibility of holding an independent view. Someone might agree with some policies but disagree with others, or they might support a general goal without endorsing a specific approach. However, this false dilemma pressures individuals to align fully with one side, shutting down constructive debate and fostering tribalism. Imagine a parent telling a teenager, "You can either study for your exams or you can forget about going to college." This creates a false dilemma because it ignores the possibility that a teenager could engage in other valuable activities, like gaining work experience, pursuing vocational training, or taking a gap year to travel, all while still potentially attending college later. The parent's statement oversimplifies the path to a successful future, limiting the teenager's perceived choices and increasing pressure to conform to a specific academic route. In marketing, companies often use false dilemmas to drive sales. A cereal commercial might state, "Eat our fortified cereal for a healthy start to your day," or risk feeling sluggish and unfocused. This implies that without their product, consumers will inevitably experience negative health outcomes. In reality, many foods and lifestyle choices contribute to energy levels and focus. The commercial presents a narrow choice to persuade consumers that their product is essential for well-being. Sometimes, a false dilemma arises unintentionally due to limited understanding or a desire to simplify. A team leader might say, "We must either adopt this new software system or fall behind our competitors." While adopting new technology is often beneficial, this statement assumes that this specific software is the only solution to stay competitive. The team could explore other software options, improve existing systems, or innovate in non-technological ways. The leader's intent might be to motivate, but the phrasing creates a false sense of urgency and limits problem solving. This fallacy can be particularly dangerous when it impacts significant decisions, such as those related to public health or personal freedom. During a crisis, authorities might declare, "We must either implement strict lockdowns or face a catastrophic loss of life." While lockdowns can be effective, this phrasing can overlook alternative strategies like enhanced testing, targeted isolation, improved healthcare capacity, or public education campaigns. It presents a stark choice to gain compliance, potentially without fully considering a comprehensive range of interventions. The core issue is the reduction of complex realities into simplistic, mutually exclusive options, which prevents thorough consideration of all available avenues. A straw man argument twists what someone said to make it simple to tear down. Imagine your friend says, "We should eat more vegetables." A straw man version of their argument would be, "So you're saying we should never eat meat again and become strict vegetarians?" This misrepresents what your friend actually proposed. They suggested more vegetables, not only vegetables. By exaggerating their point, it becomes easy to attack. Becoming a strict vegetarian is too extreme. Where would we get protein? This attacks the straw man, not your friend's original, more reasonable idea. Think of it like this. Someone builds a scarecrow, the straw man, out of straw. It looks a bit like a real person, but it's flimsy and falls apart with a light push. The person arguing builds a flimsy, twisted version of your argument, then easily knocks it down, pretending they've defeated your actual, stronger argument. Here's another scenario. A city council member suggests, we need to invest more in public transportation to reduce traffic congestion. A straw man response might be, the council member wants to ban all cars and force everyone to take buses. This is not what the council member said. They proposed more investment in public transportation, not a complete ban on cars. By misrepresenting their stance as an extreme ban, an opponent can then easily argue against it. Banning cars is ridiculous. People need their cars for work and errands. They aren't actually arguing against the idea of better public transport. They're arguing against a made-up, extreme version of it. This tactic is common in debates and political discussions. Someone might say, we need to tighten immigration laws to ensure national security. A straw man twist could be, so you believe we should deport every immigrant and close our borders completely. This extreme interpretation makes the argument sound harsh and unreasonable, allowing an easy attack. Deporting everyone is inhumane and impractical. The actual more nuanced proposal about tightening laws for security is ignored in favor of the easier to criticize straw man. Even in everyday conversations you might see this. A student tells their teacher, I think this assignment should have a later due date because we have several other major projects due at the same time. The teacher could create a straw man. So you're saying you just want to slack off and never do your work on time. This isn't what the student said. The student pointed out a legitimate scheduling conflict. By twisting it into a desire to slack off, the teacher can easily dismiss the student's concern. The key is that the person using the straw man argument doesn't actually engage with the original point. They create a distorted, weaker version of it, and then attack that weaker version. This allows them to appear victorious without having to genuinely counter the actual argument. It's a way to avoid addressing the real issue by shifting the focus to something else entirely. It's a deceptive tactic because it makes it seem like the original argument has been defeated, when in reality it was never truly confronted. The original argument remains unaddressed and potentially still valid. This is why it's important to listen carefully to what someone is actually saying and to call out straw man arguments when you encounter them. Circular reasoning happens when you try to prove something by already assuming it is true. You use the very idea you are trying to confirm as the basis for your argument. It is like trying to lift yourself by pulling on your shoelaces. The argument goes in a circle, never really proving anything new. The premise supports the conclusion, but the conclusion also supports the premise. This makes the argument logically flawed because it does not offer any independent evidence. Imagine someone says, ghosts are real, because I saw one, and you only see ghosts if they are real. Here, the belief that ghosts are real is used to explain seeing a ghost, but seeing a ghost is then used to prove ghosts are real. There is no outside proof. Another example is a person stating, the Bible is the Word of God because the Bible says it is, and everything the Bible says is true because it is the Word of God. This argument relies on the Bible's truthfulness to prove its divine origin, while simultaneously using its divine origin to prove its truthfulness. The argument circles back on itself without introducing any external evidence. Consider a company that claims, our software is the best because it has the highest user satisfaction scores. When asked how they got those scores, they reply, users are most satisfied with our software because it is the best. This creates a loop. The best claim relies on satisfaction, and satisfaction relies on being the best. No independent measure of best or satisfaction exists outside of their own assertion. Politicians sometimes fall into this trap. A candidate might say, we need to invest more in education because an educated populace is essential for a thriving economy. If asked why an educated populace is essential, they might respond, because it helps the economy thrive. which is why we need more education. The argument goes around and around without providing a deeper explanation of the direct link or the specific mechanisms through which education impacts the economy, beyond the initial statement itself. In everyday life, you might hear someone say, "I always do well on tests because I am a smart person." If asked why they are a smart person, they might respond, "Because I always do well on tests." Their smartness is proven by test scores, and test scores are attributed to their smartness. No independent assessment of their intelligence is provided. The reasoning stays within its own confines. A common scenario involves defining a term. If you say, "A good book is a book that is well written," and then define well written as having the qualities of a good book, you are engaged in circular reasoning. You have not actually defined what makes a book good or well written in any meaningful way that extends beyond the terms themselves. The definition just points back to the word being defined. The lack of new information or independent validation is the hallmark of this type of flawed argument. It is a logical fallacy because it does not provide any real support for its claims. It just restates the claim in a different form. A bandwagon fallacy happens when someone believes something is true because many people believe it. The idea suggests that an opinion gains validity simply through its popularity. This way of thinking does not rely on facts or solid reasons. Instead, it appeals to our desire to fit in or follow the crowd. People often adopt beliefs or actions because they see others do the same. This cognitive bias, known as the bandwagon effect, makes us think that if many people accept something, it must be correct. Consider a scenario involving a new smartphone. A company launches its latest model. You hear many people talk about getting this phone. Your friends show off their new devices. Advertisements claim this phone is the best-selling model. The numbers, the ads say, do not lie. Based on this widespread adoption, you conclude the phone must offer superior features and performance. You decide to buy it, not because you researched its technical specifications or compared it to other phones, but because everyone else has it. This illustrates a bandwagon fallacy. The popularity of the phone does not prove its quality. Other factors, like aggressive marketing or a brand's existing reputation, could drive sales. Think about a town meeting discussing a new town ordinance. A group of residents argues the town should adopt a strict new recycling policy. They point out that several neighboring towns already have this policy. Everyone in Springfield and Shelbyville recycles this way, they say. It works for them, so it must work for us. We should follow their example. The argument here rests on the policy's popularity in other towns, not on its actual benefits, costs, or local applicability. The residents appeal to the widespread adoption of the policy, implying its correctness. They do not present data on waste reduction, economic impact, or community compliance specific to their town. Imagine a high school student considering their college applications. Many of their classmates apply to a specific university. The student hears conversations about how great this university is, how many people want to go there, and how it seems like the most popular choice. The student feels pressure to apply to that university, even though it does not perfectly align with their academic interests or career goals. Their decision stems from the belief that if so many bright students choose this university, it must be the best option. The student falls prey to the bandwagon fallacy, allowing the popularity among their peers to influence a significant life decision. Another example appears in product endorsements. A famous celebrity promotes a new brand of health supplement. News outlets and social media channels show many people buying and using this supplement. The celebrity's endorsement and the visible public interest create a perception of effectiveness. People buy the supplement, thinking it must work, because a well-known person uses it, and many others follow suit. The product's popularity becomes the basis for its perceived value, not scientific evidence or verified user testimonials. This type of marketing thrives on the bandwagon fallacy, influencing consumer choices based on collective behavior rather than intrinsic merit. A slippery slope argument claims that if we take one step, a series of increasingly bad things will happen. leading to a terrible outcome. It assumes a direct, unavoidable chain reaction. Think of it like this. If you slide down a small hill, you will surely slide down a bigger hill, then a mountain, and finally fall off a cliff. The argument suggests there is no stopping point once the first action occurs. Here is an example. If schools allow students to use cell phones in class for educational purposes, then students will start using them for texting friends. Next, they will play games. Eventually, they will ignore all instruction, and their grades will drop. This argument presents a slippery slope. It starts with a reasonable first step, cell phones for learning, and then forecasts a series of negative and increasingly severe outcomes. The argument implies there is no way to control cell phone use once it is permitted at all. Another scenario involves personal freedom. Some argue that if the government restricts access to certain types of sugary drinks to improve public health, it will inevitably lead to the government controlling all aspects of our diet. The first step, limiting sugary drinks, is seen as the beginning of a slide towards a totalitarian state dictating what everyone eats. The argument suggests that once the government takes a small step in regulating diet, it will not stop until it controls every food choice. Consider a debate about gun control. A common slippery slope argument states that if the government enacts any new gun regulations, it will inevitably lead to the confiscation of all firearms. The first regulation, even a minor one like background checks, is presented as the initial push down a slope that ends with law-abiding citizens losing their right to own guns entirely. This argument connects a seemingly small action to a most extreme consequence without acknowledging any potential stopping points or different outcomes. In environmental policy, you might hear a slippery slope argument like this. If we allow even a small amount of development in a protected natural area, then soon the entire area will be paved over and destroyed. The initial development, perhaps for a small visitors' center, is portrayed as the beginning of the complete destruction of the ecosystem. The argument implies that once any development begins, there is no way to prevent the complete loss of the natural habitat. The core of the slippery slope argument is the idea of an unbroken, unavoidable sequence of events. It suggests that a single action sets in motion an irreversible chain leading to a final, undesirable result. It often ignores other factors, potential interventions, or the possibility of different choices being made at various points along the way. It focuses on the worst-case scenario as the only possible outcome. Just because we have no proof something is false doesn't make it true. This mistake in logic is called an appeal to ignorance. It's a common error people make when they try to argue a point. They often say, "No one has shown this isn't true, so it must be true." This flips the burden of proof, placing it on the person who doubts the claim rather than on the person making the claim. Consider a simple example. Imagine someone tells you, "Ghosts exist because no one has ever proven they don't." This statement uses an appeal to ignorance. The lack of evidence disproving ghosts doesn't automatically mean they are real. The person making the claim about ghosts has the responsibility to provide evidence for their existence, not the other way around. If you claim something is true, you must show why it is true. The absence of a disproof is not proof in itself. Think about a court case. A person is innocent until proven guilty. This is a legal principle, not a logical one that applies to all claims. In logic, if I accuse someone of a crime, I need to present evidence that they committed it. I cannot simply say, "They are guilty," because no one has proven their innocence. The burden of proof rests with the accuser. This fallacy often appears in discussions about things we cannot easily observe or test. For instance, someone might say, "There must be intelligent life on other planets because we haven't found any evidence to the contrary." While it's certainly possible intelligent life exists elsewhere, the lack of disproof isn't proof of its existence. We simply do not know. To logically support the claim of extraterrestrial life, one would need to present actual evidence, such as observations or scientific data, not just the absence of counter-evidence. Another scenario could involve a new medical treatment. A company might claim, "Our new drug is perfectly safe because no studies have shown it causes harm." This is a dangerous appeal to ignorance. The absence of evidence of harm does not equate to proof of safety. Proper testing and research are necessary to demonstrate a drug's safety. Without such evidence, claiming safety based on a lack of disproof is irresponsible and illogical. The drug company bears the responsibility to prove its product's safety, not wait for someone to prove it unsafe. The appeal to ignorance can also show up in more casual conversations. Someone might say, "I believe in luck because I've never had a bad thing happen to me when I carry my lucky charm." While they may associate the charm with good fortune, the absence of misfortune when carrying it does not prove the charm causes good luck. Many other factors could be at play, and attributing good outcomes solely to the charm without any other evidence is an appeal to ignorance. Correlation does not equal causation. You cannot claim a direct link simply because you haven't seen a reason for a different explanation. Ultimately, an appeal to ignorance is a weak argument. It relies on a lack of information rather than actual evidence. To make a strong claim, you must present positive evidence supporting your position. Not having proof that something is false does not make it true. A false cause occurs when someone assumes one event makes another happen without enough proof. People often see two things happen together, or one after the other, and jump to conclusions about a direct link. This flawed thinking leads to many misunderstandings and poor decisions. Consider a classic example. A baseball fan always wears their lucky jersey on game day. If their team wins, they believe the jersey caused the victory. If the team loses, they might blame themselves for not wearing the jersey or for washing it. The jersey has no actual power over the game's outcome. Many factors influence a baseball game: player performance, coaching decisions, even luck. The fan's jersey is simply a coincidence, not a cause. Another common scenario involves a new initiative in a workplace. A company implements a new software system. Shortly after, the sales team reports a significant increase in quarterly revenue. The CEO declares the new software directly caused the sales boost. This statement ignores many other possible factors. Did the company launch a new marketing campaign at the same time? Did a major competitor go out of business, leading to more market share? Did the economy improve, increasing consumer spending? Attributing the sales increase solely to the software, without investigating other influences, commits a false cause fallacy. Think about health claims. Someone starts taking a new vitamin supplement. A few weeks later, they feel more energetic and report fewer colds. They conclude the supplement directly improved their health. While the supplement might play a role, other lifestyle changes could also contribute. Did they start eating healthier, get more sleep, or reduce stress during that time? These factors, not just the supplement, could explain the improved well-being. Without controlled studies and scientific evidence claiming a direct cause and effect, relationship between the vitamin and improved health is a false cause. Even in large-scale social issues, this fallacy appears. Imagine a city enacts a new curfew for teenagers. The next year, juvenile crime rates drop. Some people might immediately credit the curfew for the decrease in crime. However, a drop in crime rates is a complex issue. Did the city also implement new after-school programs or create more job opportunities for young people? Did local police increase patrols in high-crime areas? Was there a general demographic shift in the city? Isolating the curfew as the sole cause of reduced crime without exploring these other possibilities is an example of false cause. The false cause fallacy often stems from confusing correlation with causation. Correlation means two things happen together. Causation means one thing directly makes the other happen. Just because two things occur at the same time or in sequence does not mean one causes the other. For instance, ice cream sales and drowning incidents both increase in the summer. This correlation does not mean eating ice cream causes drowning. The actual cause for both is warmer weather, which encourages both ice cream consumption and swimming. The sun, heat, and recreational activities are the common cause for both phenomena. If someone argued that reducing ice cream sales would reduce drownings, they would fall into the trap of false cause. We must always seek sufficient evidence to establish a true causal link, rather than assuming it based on mere co-occurrence or sequence. You encounter the tu quoque fallacy when someone dismisses an argument because the person making it does not practice what they preach. This Latin phrase means you too, or you also, and it acts as a specific type of ad hominem attack. Instead of addressing the core of the argument, the attacker shifts focus to the perceived hypocrisy of the arguer. The logic goes like this: if you do not follow your own advice, your advice cannot be good. However, whether someone lives up to their own standards has no bearing on the truth or falsehood of their statement. Consider a doctor who smokes. This doctor tells a patient, "Smoking is harmful to your health and leads to serious illnesses like cancer and heart disease." The patient might respond, "Why should I listen to you? You smoke a pack a day." Here, the patient commits the tu quoque fallacy. The fact the doctor smokes does not make the scientific evidence about smoking's harms untrue. The doctor's personal habit, while inconsistent with their advice, does not invalidate the medical facts. The argument stands on its own merits, separate from the arguer's behavior. Think about a parent telling their child, "You need to clean your room. A tidy space helps you focus better." The child might retort, "But your desk is always messy." The child uses the tu quoque fallacy. The state of the parent's desk does not change the truth that a tidy room helps with focus. The parent's messiness might show a lack of discipline, but it does not negate the benefit of a clean room. In politics, this fallacy appears often. A politician criticizes an opponent for accepting large campaign donations. The opponent responds, "You took donations from corporations last year." This reply uses the tu quoque fallacy. The opponent avoids discussing the ethics of campaign finance by pointing to the accuser's past actions. Even if the accuser previously accepted similar donations, this fact does not make the act of accepting large donations ethical or unethical. The original criticism about campaign finance deserves an answer on its own terms, not a redirection. Another common scenario involves environmental discussions. Someone urges others to reduce their carbon footprint by driving less. A listener might say, "You fly on planes for vacations. How can you tell us to drive less?" Again, this is a tu quoque fallacy. The individual's travel choices, while they involve a carbon footprint, do not change the environmental impact of air travel or the benefits of driving less. The argument about reducing carbon emissions remains valid, regardless of the arguer's personal travel habits. This fallacy tries to discredit an argument by attacking the arguer's credibility based on their perceived hypocrisy. It diverts attention from the actual issue. The truth of a statement does not depend on the moral consistency of the person making it. A valid argument stands or falls based on its evidence and reasoning, not on whether the person presenting it perfectly embodies its principles. A loaded question is a trick question. It's a single question that contains a hidden assumption or takes a controversial stance, forcing the person answering to seemingly admit to that assumption, even if it is not true. It's like a trap. The question is designed to make you look bad, no matter how you answer it. It puts the person answering in a tough spot because a simple yes or no isn't enough to address the underlying unproven claim. Think about it this way. Someone asks you, "Have you stopped cheating on your taxes?" If you say yes, you're admitting you were cheating on your taxes before. If you say no, you're admitting you're still cheating on your taxes. The question assumes you cheated on your taxes in the first place, but offers no proof or context for that assumption. It forces you to deal with the accusation instead of simply answering the question. Here's another example. Imagine a reporter asks a politician, "When did you stop taking bribes?" This question embeds the accusation that the politician did take bribes at some point. If the politician says, "I never took bribes," they are then seen as dodging the direct question about when they stopped. If they try to answer the when, they are tacitly admitting guilt. The question is not a neutral inquiry, it carries a built-in judgment. These questions are often used in arguments or debates to unfairly corner an opponent. They are a form of logical fallacy, specifically a type of complex question fallacy. The fallacy lies in asking a question that cannot be answered without appearing to agree with a premise that has not been established or proven. The question combines two or more distinct questions or assumptions into one, making it impossible to answer each part separately. Consider a scenario in a courtroom. A lawyer asks a witness, "Did you hit your neighbor with your car before or after you ran the stop sign?" This question assumes two things: that the witness hit their neighbor with a car and that the witness ran a stop sign. Both are serious accusations that require evidence. However, the question presents them as undeniable facts, putting the witness in a difficult position. If the witness tries to answer before or after, they are admitting to both actions, even if neither is true. The witness has to challenge the premise of the question itself, rather than just provide a simple answer. The power of a loaded question comes from its ability to shift the burden of proof. Instead of the questioner providing evidence for their assumption, they force the person answering to disprove it or face negative implications. It's a tactic to win an argument by manipulating the conversation, rather than by presenting facts or sound reasoning. It's not about seeking information. It's about pushing an agenda or making an accusation. A red herring throws you off track. It's when someone brings up something completely unrelated to the main point, hoping you'll focus on that instead. Think of a debate. If one person argues for more school funding and the other person suddenly starts talking about how teenagers spend too much time on their phones, that's a red herring. The phone usage, while perhaps an interesting topic, has nothing to do with school funding. The goal is to make you forget the original argument and get sidetracked by the new, irrelevant information. Imagine a company facing criticism for low employee wages. Instead of addressing the wage issue directly, the CEO might announce a new, lavish office renovation. The renovation might be nice, but it doesn't change the fact that employees are still underpaid. The office renovation is a red herring. It's designed to distract from the core problem of wages. The company hopes the public will be impressed by the new offices and forget about the original complaint. They want you to admire the shiny new building instead of asking about paychecks. Consider a political discussion about a new healthcare bill. A politician might be pressed on a specific clause that seems unfair. Instead of explaining or defending that clause, the politician might pivot to how much they care about the elderly or how hard they work for their constituents. While their care for the elderly or their work ethic might be true, it's not relevant to the fairness of the specific clause in the healthcare bill. The politician uses these general statements to avoid addressing the problematic detail. They hope their display of empathy will overshadow the specific concerns about the bill's language. Another scenario involves a parent asking their child about a broken vase. The child, instead of admitting fault or explaining what happened, might start talking about how hungry they are or how unfair it is that their sibling gets more screen time. The hunger and the sibling's screen time are irrelevant to the broken vase. The child introduces these topics to divert attention from the actual issue at hand. They want to shift the focus from their mistake to a different complaint. They use a red herring to avoid responsibility. In a courtroom, a defense attorney might introduce evidence that, while interesting, doesn't actually prove their client's innocence or guilt. For example, if the prosecution presents strong evidence linking the defendant to a crime, the defense might spend a lot of time focusing on a minor, unrelated detail of the victim's past, hoping to cast doubt on the victim's character rather than directly challenging the evidence against their client. This misdirection attempts to sway the jury's attention away from the central arguments. The attorney wants the jury to consider something else, anything else, besides the direct evidence. A red herring is a deliberate tactic. It is not an accidental digression. The person using it knows they are changing the subject. They do it to avoid dealing with a difficult question, to evade responsibility, or to manipulate an audience. The effectiveness of a red herring relies on the audience getting caught up in the new information and forgetting the original point. It's a way to win an argument or escape scrutiny by simply changing the topic. Moral relativism claims that all moral positions hold equal validity, essentially stating that no single moral stance is objectively superior to another. This perspective often arises from observing the diverse moral codes across different cultures and throughout history. For instance, a relativist might point to the historical practice of slavery in some societies and its condemnation in others, concluding that both positions are simply different, not that one is inherently right or wrong. This view suggests that moral judgments are only true or false relative to a specific standpoint, like a culture or an individual. It implies that if a society accepts a certain practice, then that practice is morally right for that society, regardless of how other societies might view it. This approach often presents a convenient way to sidestep complex ethical dilemmas. When confronted with a difficult moral choice, a relativist might argue that since all moral positions are equally valid, there is no objective reason to choose one over another. This can lead to a state of moral inaction or apathy, as it removes the impetus to critically evaluate and defend one's ethical choices. For example, consider a company that faces a choice between maximizing profits by using cheap labor in a country with lax labor laws, or upholding higher ethical standards that increase costs. A moral relativist might argue that both positions are valid within their respective frameworks, the company's framework of profit maximization and an external framework of labor rights. This allows them to avoid the difficult work of reconciling these conflicting values or defending one over the other. Another scenario involves personal choices. Imagine an individual who believes it is morally permissible to lie to avoid hurting someone's feelings. Another person believes that honesty is always the best policy, even if it causes discomfort. A moral relativist might say that both these positions are equally valid, as they reflect different personal moral frameworks. This means the individual does not need to justify their decision to lie beyond stating it aligns with their personal moral compass. They do not have to engage in a deeper analysis of the consequences of their actions, or consider if there might be universal principles, like respect for truth, that apply. The core idea of moral relativism is that there are no universal moral standards that apply to all people at all times. This implies that we cannot judge the moral practices of one society by the standards of another. So, if female genital mutilation is acceptable in one culture, a moral relativist might say that it is simply a different practice, not necessarily a wrong one, from the perspective of that culture. This stance can be seen as promoting tolerance, but critics argue it can also prevent critical moral appraisal and social progress. If all moral positions are equally valid, then there is no basis to argue for the moral improvement of a society, or to condemn atrocities like genocide or extreme forms of discrimination, as these actions would simply be right within the framework of the perpetrator's culture. The implications of moral relativism extend to the very idea of moral progress. If morality is merely a matter of shifting cultural preferences, then the abolition of slavery, the women's suffrage movement, or the civil rights movement were not moral advancements, but simply changes in societal norms. This view undermines the concept of striving for a better, more just world, as it suggests that there is no objective better to aim for. A double standard exists when you apply different rules to similar situations, usually to benefit your own point of view. It is unfair. Imagine a parent who tells one child they must finish all their homework before playing, but lets another child play video games even if their homework is incomplete. That is a double standard. The parent uses one rule for one child and a different rule for the other, despite both being in the same situation. Having homework. Consider a workplace scenario. A manager strictly enforces a no personal calls during work hours policy for entry-level employees. If a junior staff member takes a quick personal call, the manager issues a formal warning. However, the same manager frequently takes long personal calls at their desk without any repercussions. Here, the manager applies one standard to their subordinates and a different, more lenient standard to themselves. The situation is identical. Making personal calls during work hours, but the principles applied are different, favoring the manager. This creates a sense of injustice and resentment among the employees. Think about public discourse. A politician might criticize an opposing party for raising taxes, arguing it hurts the economy and burdens citizens. Yet, when their own party proposes a tax increase, they defend it as a necessary measure for public services or economic growth. The core issue is the same: increasing taxes. However, the politician uses one principle to condemn the opposition's actions and a completely different one to justify their own, depending on whose ox is being gored. This shift in principles highlights a double standard, designed to gain political advantage rather than maintain consistent fairness. Another common example appears in social judgments. If a man expresses strong opinions and is assertive, people might praise him as a leader or decisive. If a woman expresses equally strong opinions and assertiveness in a similar context, she might be labeled as bossy or aggressive. The behavior is the same, expressing strong opinions and being assertive. However, the interpretation and judgment differ based on gender. This demonstrates a double standard where societal expectations or biases influence how similar actions are perceived and evaluated, often disadvantaging one group over another. The underlying principle should be consistent. Expressing strong opinions is either good or bad, regardless of who does it. When it varies, it is a double standard. Many people believe something, so it must be true. This idea is called an appeal to popularity. It's a common way people try to prove a point, but it's a weak argument. Just because many people accept a claim does not make it a fact. Think about it this way. For centuries, most people believed the Earth was flat. Sailors worried they might fall off the edge. This belief was widely accepted, but it was wrong. Eventually, evidence proved the Earth is a sphere. The popularity of the flat Earth idea did not make it true. Science and observation showed otherwise. Another example is fashion trends. In the 1980s, big hair and shoulder pads were very popular. Everyone wore them. Did that make them the best or most practical clothing choices? No. Fashion is a matter of taste and what's popular at a given time. What's in changes. Its popularity does not mean it's inherently good or correct. Consider a business scenario. A company launches a new product. Initially, many customers buy it. Sales are high, and everyone seems to like it. The marketing team might say, "Our product is successful because so many people are buying it." However, after a few months, customers start complaining about defects. Returns increase. The product's initial popularity did not mean it was a high-quality product. Its widespread acceptance only meant it was popular for a short time, not that it was good. The underlying quality was lacking. In politics, an appeal to popularity often appears during elections. A candidate might claim, "My policies are the best because polls show most people support them." While public opinion is important in a democracy, the popularity of a policy does not automatically make it effective or ethical. A policy might be popular but have negative long-term consequences. For instance, a policy to cut taxes for everyone might be very popular. But if it leads to massive government debt and cuts in essential services, its popularity does not make it a good policy. We see this in health fads too. A new diet plan sweeps the nation. Everyone talks about it, and celebrities endorse it. Millions of people try it. Does its popularity mean it is healthy or effective for everyone? Not necessarily. Some popular diets can be unhealthy or unsustainable in the long run. Scientific evidence, not popularity, determines a diet's true value. A doctor will look at research and individual health needs, not just what's trending. The appeal to popularity is a logical fallacy. A fallacy is a flaw in reasoning. This particular fallacy tries to use the number of people who believe something as proof of its truth. But truth depends on evidence, facts, and sound reasoning, not on how many people agree. When someone argues, "Everyone knows X is true," they are often using this fallacy. They hope you will agree simply because they say many others do. It is important to look past widespread belief and ask for evidence. What are the facts? What are the reasons? Do independent sources confirm the claim? These questions lead to a stronger understanding than simply accepting something because it is popular. A false analogy happens when someone compares two things that are just too different for the comparison to make sense. It's like saying a cat and a car are alike because they both have four parts that touch the ground. Sure, they both have four points of contact, but one is a living creature and the other is a machine. The differences between them make any deep comparison illogical. Think about it this way. Imagine someone argues that raising children is just like training a dog. They might say, you need to be firm with both, set clear boundaries, and reward good behavior. On the surface, some of that sounds reasonable for both kids and dogs. You do want to be consistent with kids and dogs, and rewards can work for both. But children have complex emotions, can reason, develop their own personalities, and are influenced by countless social factors. Dogs, while intelligent and capable of learning, do not possess the same level of cognitive and emotional complexity. To treat a child exactly like a dog, ignoring their unique human development, would be a false analogy. The differences between a human child and a dog are so vast that any comparison used to dictate parenting methods based solely on dog training would be flawed. Another example. Someone might claim that a country's economy is just like a household budget. They might argue, if a household needs to cut spending when money is tight, then a country should do the same. While both involve managing money, a household budget operates on a much smaller scale with fewer variables. A national economy involves intricate global trade, international relations, complex financial markets, unemployment rates, inflation, and social safety nets. A government can print money, though with consequences, raise taxes, and influence interest rates, actions a household cannot take. Reducing a national economy to a simple household budget ignores the massive differences in scale, complexity, and available tools. The analogy fails because the two systems are fundamentally dissimilar in too many critical ways. Here's another scenario. Someone might say, learning to play the violin is just like learning to ride a bicycle. Once you get the hang of it, you never forget. While both involve developing motor skills and muscle memory, the comparison quickly falls apart. Riding a bicycle is largely a physical skill that, once mastered, becomes almost automatic. Playing the violin, however, requires continuous practice to maintain dexterity, intonation, and musicality. If you stop practicing the violin for a long time, your skills will undoubtedly diminish. The nuances of musical expression and the complex coordination required for violin playing are far beyond the simple balance and pedaling of a bicycle. The analogy is false because the sustained effort and continuous refinement needed for one are not present in the other. A common one you hear is comparing a government to a business. A government should be run like a business, people say. Businesses focus on efficiency and profit, and governments should too. But a business's primary goal is profit for shareholders. A government's goal is to serve its citizens, maintain order, provide public services, and protect rights, often without a profit motive. A business can choose its customers. A government must serve everyone. A business can go bankrupt. A government cannot in the same way. The metrics of success are entirely different. Trying to apply business efficiency models directly to government functions often overlooks the unique responsibilities and ethical considerations of public service. The fundamental objectives and structures are too different to warrant such a direct comparison. People sometimes argue that something is right because it has always been done that way. This common way of thinking is called an appeal to tradition. It assumes that if a practice or belief has a long history, then it must be good, correct, or effective. This thinking can be a problem because it stops us from looking at new ideas or fixing old problems. Consider a company that has always held its weekly team meeting on Friday afternoons. For years, employees complain that these meetings cut into their weekend plans and make them rush to finish work. When someone suggests moving the meeting to Monday morning, the manager immediately rejects the idea. "We have always had our meetings on Friday," the manager states. "It works because we have always done it that way." The manager uses tradition as the only reason to keep the meeting time. They do not consider how moving the meeting might improve team morale or productivity. This shows how appealing to tradition can prevent positive change. Another example appears in education. A school uses a teaching method that involves rote memorization for all subjects. New teachers suggest trying more interactive project-based learning. The veteran teachers resist this idea. "Our school has taught this way for 50 years, one says. "Students have always learned this way. Why change it now?" They ignore studies showing that project-based learning helps students understand and remember material better. They just rely on the past as proof of what works best. Think about a small town that celebrates a local festival every year. Part of the festival involves a parade route that winds through narrow, crowded streets. Over the years, the town has grown, and the parade route now creates major traffic jams and safety concerns. A town council member proposes a new, wider route that avoids the most congested areas. Many older residents object. "Our grandfathers marched this route," they say. "It's tradition. We can't change it." They value the old route simply because it is old, not because it still makes sense for the town's current size and needs. This type of argument often ignores why a tradition started in the first place. For example, some old farming methods came from a time when farmers did not have modern machinery or scientific knowledge about soil. If a farmer insists on using those old methods today, simply because their ancestors did, they ignore advances that make farming more efficient and sustainable. The original reasons for the old methods might no longer apply. An appeal to tradition suggests that the past guarantees success or correctness. But the world changes. What worked yesterday may not work today. Circumstances, knowledge, and technology evolve. To make good decisions, we need to look at current facts and evidence, not just rely on how things used to be. Vagueness involves using language that lacks precision, often to sidestep a direct answer or to avoid a confrontation. It is a communication tactic where a speaker or writer deliberately employs ambiguous words or phrases, making their message open to multiple interpretations. This can be a strategic choice, allowing individuals to maintain flexibility, avoid commitment, or simply to delay a definitive response. For example, if a manager asks an employee, "When will the report be finished?" and the employee responds, "It'll be done soon," the employee is being vague. Soon lacks a specific time frame, preventing the manager from holding the employee to a concrete deadline. The employee avoids committing to a specific date, which could be beneficial if they are unsure about their progress or if they want to avoid potential blame for delays. Consider another scenario. A politician is asked about a controversial policy. Instead of directly stating their support or opposition, they might say, "We are exploring all options to ensure the best outcome for our constituents." This statement sounds positive and proactive, but it conveys no specific stance on the policy. The politician avoids alienating any particular group of voters by remaining non-committal. If pressed for details, they might pivot to discussing the complexity of the issue or the need for thorough deliberation, further obfuscating their position. Vagueness can also manifest in the use of pronouns without clear antecedents or through the generalization of specific events. Imagine a team leader saying, "Someone needs to take care of that." This avoids assigning responsibility to a specific individual. If everyone assumes someone else will handle it, the task may never get done. This also prevents any one person from being held accountable if the task fails to be completed. Similarly, a person might say, "Things are happening," when asked about a personal situation. This provides no real information, but suggests activity, giving the impression of progress without revealing any specifics. In legal contexts, vagueness can be particularly problematic. Laws or contracts written with vague language can lead to disputes because the intent of the parties involved is not clearly defined. For instance, A contract stating that a service will be provided in a timely manner leaves significant room for disagreement if the parties have different interpretations of timely. One party might consider a week timely, while the other expects completion within 24 hours. This lack of precision can necessitate further negotiation or even litigation to clarify the original intent. Moreover, vagueness can be a defensive mechanism. When confronted with an uncomfortable truth or an accusation, individuals might resort to vague denials or deflections. If someone asks, "Did you take my pen?" a vague answer like, "I don't recall seeing it," avoids a direct yes or no. This response leaves open the possibility that they did take it but simply forgot, or that they genuinely don't remember, effectively sidestepping a direct admission or denial. This type of communication can be frustrating for the questioner, as it fails to provide the clarity they seek and often leaves them feeling unheard or misled. Cognitive dissonance describes the uncomfortable feeling you get when your beliefs, ideas, or values clash with your actions. It's like having two thoughts that just do not fit together, and your brain wants to fix that mismatch. When you experience this mental discomfort, you feel a strong push to make things consistent again. You might change your behavior, alter your beliefs, or even find new information to make the conflicting ideas seem more in line with each other. People do this to relieve the tension and feel more at ease. Consider a person who believes in living a healthy lifestyle. They tell themselves they eat well, exercise regularly, and make good choices for their body. However, imagine this person frequently eats fast food, skips workouts, and often stays up late watching television. This creates cognitive dissonance. Their belief in being healthy conflicts directly with their unhealthy actions. To lessen this discomfort, they might start to rationalize their choices. They might say, "I'm so busy, I don't have time to cook healthy meals." Or, "A little fast food won't hurt, I'll work out twice as hard tomorrow." They are trying to find excuses or add new thoughts to reduce the mental clash between their belief and their behavior. They might also begin to think that exercise is not as important as they once believed, changing their belief to match their action. Another common scenario involves someone who considers themselves an honest person. One day, their boss asks them to lie to a client about a missed deadline. The person faces a dilemma, upholding their belief in honesty or following their boss's instructions to protect their job. If they choose to lie, they will experience cognitive dissonance. To deal with this, they might justify their action by saying, "It was a small lie and it protected the company," or "Everyone does it, so it's not a big deal." This justification helps them feel better about doing something that goes against their core value of honesty. Over time, if they continue to tell small lies and justify them, their belief in honesty might weaken, making it easier to tell bigger lies in the future. Their initial belief system starts to shift because they continually act in ways that contradict it. Marketers and politicians often use cognitive dissonance to influence people. They might present information that causes a conflict in your mind, then offer a simple solution that requires you to change your beliefs. For example, a political campaign might highlight a contradiction between a group's stated values and their past actions. They might say, "You claim to support X, but you voted for Y, which hurts X." This creates discomfort. Then, the campaign offers a clear path to resolve the dissonance by supporting their candidate or adopting a new viewpoint. You feel pressure to align your beliefs with a consistent narrative, even if it means altering your previous understanding. The goal is to make you uncomfortable with your current thoughts, so you readily accept a new way of thinking that the manipulator provides. You effectively change your own beliefs to reduce the internal tension, rather than question the information itself. Gaslighting makes you question your perception of reality. It's a type of manipulation where a person makes you doubt your own memory, feelings, and sanity. Imagine this. You have a clear memory of a conversation you had with your partner. You remember specific words, the tone of voice, even where you sat. When you bring it up later, your partner looks at you with a blank stare and says, "That never happened. You're imagining things." You feel a jolt of confusion. Did you really imagine it? You were so sure. This is how gaslighting starts. Slowly, chipping away at your confidence in your own mind. Think about a common scenario in the workplace. You submit a report, and your manager praises it in a team meeting. Later that week, when a problem arises that relates to that report, the manager pulls you aside. "I never said your report was good," they state. "In fact, I remember telling you it needed work. You must have misunderstood me." You know they complimented your report, but they stand firm, denying it completely. You start to wonder if you misheard them, or if your memory is faulty. This constant denial of facts you know to be true can lead to intense self-doubt. Another tactic gaslighters use is minimizing your feelings. You tell a friend you feel hurt by a comment they made. They dismiss your feelings immediately. "You're too sensitive," they say, or "It was just a joke. Why are you overreacting?" This makes you feel like your emotions are invalid or disproportionate to the situation. Over time, you might stop expressing your feelings, fearing you will hear that you are too emotional or crazy. This internalizes the gaslighter's message, making you believe your own emotional responses are wrong. Gaslighters often shift blame. If something goes wrong, they twist the situation to make it your fault. For example, a family member might forget to pay a bill, leading to a late fee. When you bring it up, they exclaim, "If you had reminded me, this wouldn't have happened. You always expect me to remember everything." Suddenly, their oversight becomes your responsibility. This tactic makes you feel guilty and responsible for their actions, even when logic tells you otherwise. You might start apologizing constantly, even for things that are clearly not your fault. They also employ a strategy called countering, where they challenge your memories directly. "Are you sure about that?" they might ask. Or, "Your memory is terrible. That's not how it went." They don't just deny, they actively assert their version of events as the absolute truth, regardless of evidence. This can be especially damaging because it directly attacks your cognitive abilities. You begin to mistrust your own recollection of events, even significant ones. For instance, you tell your partner about a specific event from your past, and they interject, "No, that's not how it happened at all. You've changed that story in your head." This makes you question your own life narrative. The impact of gaslighting can be profound. People subjected to gaslighting often experience increased anxiety and depression. They may feel constantly confused and disoriented. Their self-confidence and self-worth erode. They become isolated, reluctant to share their experiences with others because they fear no one will believe them or that they are truly losing it. This can lead to a state of emotional fragility where they become dependent on the gaslighter's validation because their own internal compass has been systematically dismantled. They may feel like they are walking on eggshells, always trying to avoid conflict or further manipulation. Their sense of agency diminishes, and they may find it difficult to make decisions independently, relying on the gaslighter for guidance. Bait and switch is a trick where a seller advertises a great deal to get you interested, but then tries to sell you a more expensive or different item once you're in the store or on their website. They promise one thing, but deliver something else entirely. It's like dangling a juicy carrot to lure you in, then yanking it away and offering a rotten apple instead. Imagine you see an advertisement for a brand new, high-definition television for an incredibly low price, let's say $200. You rush to the store, excited to snag this amazing deal. However, when you get there, a salesperson tells you that the $200 TV sold out just moments ago. They then try to steer you toward a similar TV that costs $800, explaining that it has slightly better features, even though it's not what you came for. This is a classic bait and switch. The cheap TV was the bait to get you in the door, and the more expensive TV is the switch. This tactic isn't just limited to electronics. Car dealerships often use bait and switch. They might advertise a specific car model with all the bells and whistles at an unbelievably low monthly payment. When you arrive at the dealership, they might say that particular car was already sold, or that the advertised price only applied to a base model without any of the features you saw in the ad. Then, they push you towards a more expensive car or a financing plan with higher payments. They got you on the lot with a sweet offer, then switched the terms once you were there. Another common scenario involves services. A cleaning company might advertise a deep cleaning service for your home for a flat fee of $100. When the cleaners arrive, they might inform you that the $100 only covers a very basic dusting and vacuuming, and that deep cleaning actually requires additional services that will cost you an extra $200. You feel pressured to agree because they are already at your home and you want the job done right. They baited you with a low price, then switched the actual service and cost. Online retailers can also engage in bait and switch. You might click on an ad for a product at a fantastic discount, only to find that when you add it to your cart, the price changes, or the specific model shown in the ad is out of stock and they offer a different, more expensive version. The initial low price was the bait, and the switch happened once you were ready to buy. The goal of bait and switch is to get you committed. Once you have invested time and effort, driving to a store, talking to a salesperson, or filling out online forms, you are more likely to go along with the switch, even if it's not what you originally wanted. The seller banks on your reluctance to leave empty-handed or to start your search all over again. They create a sense of urgency or scarcity around the bait to make you act quickly, then spring the switch on you. Guilt by association is a sneaky way to reject an idea. It works by linking an argument to someone or a group that people already dislike or distrust. Instead of attacking the idea itself, the person using this fallacy attacks its source. They try to make you think, if that person believes it, it must be wrong. Imagine a politician proposes a new tax plan. A critic might say, that plan sounds exactly like something the radical fringe group Citizens for Chaos would support. The critic doesn't explain why the tax plan is bad, they just connect it to a group most people view negatively. The hope is that you will then dismiss the tax plan because you dislike Citizens for Chaos, not because you have actually evaluated the plan's merits or flaws. Here's another scenario. A scientist presents groundbreaking research about climate change. Someone who disagrees with the findings might say, well, that scientist works for a university that gets funding from environmental activist organizations. Of course, they'd find evidence for climate change. This statement doesn't challenge the scientific methods, the data, or the conclusions of the research. It implies the research is flawed simply because of where the scientist works and who funds the institution. The connection, real or imagined, is used to taint the argument. Consider a company launching a new software product. A competitor might spread rumors. Did you hear? The lead developer for that new software used to work for Code Scammers Inc., that company that went bankrupt last year after a major data breach. The competitor isn't saying the new software has flaws or security vulnerabilities. They are trying to create a negative impression by linking the current product to a past failure of one of its creators, even if the developer had no role in the data breach or bankruptcy. The association, not the product's quality, becomes the target. This fallacy is effective because it plays on our emotions and biases. We often form opinions about people or groups, and those opinions can heavily influence how we receive information from them. If we already have a negative view of a source, we are more likely to reject anything that source says, regardless of its truth or validity. The tactic distracts from the actual substance of the argument. It shifts focus from, is this idea good or bad, to, who said this idea, and then uses the who to answer the is it good or bad question. Think about a historical example. During the Cold War, if someone advocated for a social program, an opponent might label it socialist or communist. The words socialist and communist were loaded terms in that era, associated with enemies and oppressive regimes. By attaching those labels, the opponent could discredit the social program without having to argue against its practical benefits or drawbacks. The association alone was meant to be enough to turn people against it. In essence, guilt by association is an attempt to poison the well. It tries to make you distrust an argument by making you distrust the person or group presenting it. It avoids engaging with the argument itself and instead focuses on irrelevant connections to sway opinion. Misdirection works by subtly guiding your focus away from what truly matters, shifting your attention to something that seems important but holds no real relevance. Think of it like a magician performing a trick. While one hand waves dramatically in the air, drawing your eye, the other hand quietly performs the real action, the sleight of hand that makes the illusion work. You focus on the showy gesture, missing the secret move. This isn't about outright lying, but rather about controlling where you direct your limited attention. In many situations, people use misdirection to avoid uncomfortable truths or to downplay significant problems. Imagine a company facing a major public relations crisis, perhaps a serious defect in their product that harms customers. Instead of directly addressing the defect, they might launch a massive advertising campaign highlighting their commitment to charity or their new environmentally friendly initiatives. The public sees the charitable work or green efforts and feels good about the company, while the product defect issue fades into the background. The company successfully diverted attention from the real problem. Consider a political debate. A candidate faces tough questions about their past policy decisions, which have had negative consequences. To avoid giving direct answers, the candidate might pivot to an entirely different topic, perhaps emphasizing a new, bold plan for the future that sounds exciting, but has no direct connection to the original question. They might talk about improving schools or creating jobs, even if the initial question was about budget deficits. The audience hears these positive-sounding ideas and their focus shifts, forgetting the original difficult question. This move allows the candidate to bypass scrutiny. Another common scenario involves a team missing a project deadline. The team leader knows the core issue was poor planning and resource allocation. However, in the meeting with upper management, the leader might spend considerable time discussing minor technical glitches or unexpected software updates. They explain in detail how these small, unforeseen issues delayed progress, making it seem like external factors were the primary cause. This draws attention away from the deeper, systemic problems within the team's project management process. Management focuses on the technical challenges, not the underlying competence. Misdirection is effective because human attention is a finite resource. We can only process so much information at once. When someone creates a strong, compelling point of focus, our minds naturally gravitate towards it. This leaves less mental capacity to observe or question other elements, especially those that are subtle or less overtly presented. For instance, a salesperson trying to sell you a used car might spend a lot of time talking about the car's brand new tires and shiny paint job. You admire the fresh appearance and the feeling of new tires on the road. Meanwhile, they might casually gloss over a flickering check engine light or a strange noise coming from the transmission, hoping your attention remains fixed on the superficial improvements. In a family argument, one person might bring up a minor, unrelated grievance from weeks ago rather than discussing the current core conflict. They might say, "Well, you always leave your dirty dishes in the sink," when the real argument is about a broken promise. This shifts the argument to a smaller, less impactful issue, and the main problem goes unaddressed. The focus moves to dirty dishes, away from the broken promise. The conversation gets sidetracked onto something irrelevant, allowing the real issue to escape resolution. You know, it's pretty common to see someone dismiss an argument, not because the argument itself is bad, but because the person making it didn't always act in line with what they are saying. This is called the appeal to hypocrisy, or to quoque, in Latin, which simply means you also. It's a type of informal fallacy. Essentially, you are pointing out a contradiction between someone's argument and their actions or past statements, and then using that contradiction to try and invalidate their current point. Let's say a doctor who you know smokes, tells you that smoking is terrible for your health and you should quit. An appeal to hypocrisy would be to respond, "Well, you smoke, so why should I listen to you?" Now, the doctor's smoking habit doesn't change the medical fact that smoking is harmful. The argument itself, that smoking is bad for your health, stands on its own merits, regardless of whether the doctor practices what they preach. You are attacking the person, not the argument. Think about a politician who once voted against a certain environmental protection bill and now, years later, is advocating for stronger climate action. A critic might jump on this saying, "How can he talk about protecting the environment now? He voted against it before." This line of reasoning is an appeal to hypocrisy. Whether or not the politician was consistent in their past actions doesn't automatically make their current arguments about climate action false or invalid. Maybe their views evolved, or perhaps they have new information. The strength of their current argument should be judged on the evidence and logic they present, not on their past voting record. Consider a parent telling their child not to lie. If the child replies, "But you lied about eating the last cookie," the child is using an appeal to hypocrisy. The parent's past lie about the cookie doesn't make the statement "lying is wrong" any less true. The principle against lying remains valid. The child is trying to deflect from the issue of their own truthfulness by pointing out the parent's inconsistency. This fallacy often comes up in discussions about ethics or morality. Someone might argue that a certain behavior is unethical. If it comes out that the person making the argument has engaged in that very behavior in the past, an appeal to hypocrisy might be used to discredit their current stance. For instance, if a public figure speaks out against tax evasion, and then it's revealed they once dodged taxes, some might say they're a hypocrite, so their opinion on tax evasion doesn't matter. Yet, the ethical principle regarding tax evasion is independent of the accuser's past actions. The core problem with the appeal to hypocrisy is that it shifts the focus away from the actual argument and onto the character or past actions of the person making the argument. It's a distraction. While pointing out hypocrisy might be relevant for judging a person's character or credibility, it doesn't automatically invalidate the truth or soundness of their logical argument. A flawed messenger can still deliver a true message. The truth of a statement is not dependent on the speaker's consistency. The next time you hear someone dismiss an argument by saying, "But you did it too," remember to look closely at the argument itself. Does it stand on its own, or is the critique just a clever way to avoid addressing the actual point? Falsification means twisting evidence or facts to make an argument look wrong. Imagine a scientist trying to prove a theory. They run experiments and collect data. If they then change some of that data or leave out results that don't fit their idea, that's falsification. They are manipulating the truth to make their argument, or someone else's, appear invalid. Think about a court case. A lawyer presents evidence to support their client. If that lawyer knows a piece of evidence hurts their case, and they try to hide it or even alter it, they are engaging in falsification. They are trying to make the opposing argument seem weaker by tampering with the facts. It's not just about lying directly, but about making sure the information presented steers people away from the actual truth. Consider a company launching a new product. They want to show that their product is incredibly effective. They conduct studies and get results. If some of those results show the product isn't as good as they claim, and they decide to alter the numbers in their report, that's falsification. They are making the argument for their product's efficacy seem stronger by invalidating any data that contradicts it. They are manufacturing a reality that isn't true to sway public opinion or investor confidence. Another example can be seen in academic research. A student writes a paper and needs to cite sources. If the student invents sources or quotes, or changes the content of real sources to better support their thesis, they are falsifying information. They are trying to make their argument more persuasive by creating false support, thereby invalidating any counter-arguments or making their own appear more robust than it truly is. This undermines the entire principle of academic integrity. Falsification is about deception by altering the foundational elements of an argument. It's not just about disagreeing with an argument. It's about making sure that argument cannot stand on its own by corrupting the information it relies on. It attacks the very validity of an argument by making its supporting facts unreliable or non-existent. When someone falsifies evidence, they are actively working to undermine the credibility of information, making it difficult for anyone to assess the truth. It's a deliberate act to mislead, distort, and ultimately invalidate. Appeal to pity happens when someone tries to win an argument by making others feel sorry for them. They do not offer facts or solid reasons. They just want you to agree because you feel bad for them. This tactic avoids real discussion. It focuses on your emotions, not the truth of the argument. Imagine a student who did not turn in a project on time. They tell their teacher, "Please, I need an extension. My dog got sick, my car broke down, and I barely slept. I cannot think straight." The teacher might feel sympathy. The student hopes this sympathy will get them an extension, but the student's troubles do not change the fact they missed the deadline, the quality of their work, or the actual reasons for the delay are not the points of the argument. The student just wants pity. Think about a charity advertisement. It shows sad pictures of starving children. The narrator's voice sounds very sorrowful. The ad asks for money. The pictures and music create strong feelings of sadness and a desire to help. This ad appeals to your pity. It makes you feel a strong urge to donate. While helping those in need is good, the ad does not offer a detailed report on how the money will be used or the charity's success rates. It simply uses emotion to get your money. The argument is, these children suffer, so give money. The suffering is real, but it is not a logical reason for you to give your money to this specific charity without more information. In court, a lawyer might use an appeal to pity. A defense lawyer says, "My client made a mistake, but he has a sick mother and 3 young children. If you send him to jail, his family will lose everything. They depend on him." The lawyer paints a picture of a desperate family. This aims to make the jury feel sorry for the client and his family. The lawyer wants the jury to give a lighter sentence or even find him not guilty. The client's family situation does not change whether he committed a crime. The family's hardship does not prove innocence. The lawyer hopes pity overrides judgment based on facts and evidence. Consider a political speech. A candidate says, "I understand your struggles. My family faced eviction. I know what it feels like to worry about food and a roof over your head. Vote for me, and I will fix these problems." The candidate shares a personal story of hardship. This story aims to create a bond and make voters feel sorry for them or relate to their past suffering. Voters might then vote for the candidate out of sympathy, not based on their actual policy plans or qualifications. The appeal distracts from a logical review of their platform. In a workplace, an employee might ask for a raise. They say, "I really need this raise. My rent went up and my child needs expensive medical care. I cannot make ends meet without it." The employee presents a personal financial crisis. This makes the boss feel uncomfortable or sympathetic. However, the boss should base raise decisions on performance, market value, and company policy, not on the employee's personal financial struggles. The employee uses pity to bypass a logical review of their work performance or contribution to the company. Their need is real, but it does not justify a raise based on merit. Overgeneralization means you take one bad experience and decide it will always happen. You make a big, sweeping statement based on very little information. Imagine you go to a new restaurant and the service is terrible. The waiter forgets your order. The food takes an hour and it comes out cold. Instead of thinking, "That restaurant had bad service tonight," you might think, "Every restaurant in this city has terrible service." You just took one event and applied it to every other. Similar situation. This is a classic example of overgeneralization. Consider a student who studies hard for a test, truly puts in the effort, but still fails. They might immediately think, I always fail tests. I am just not smart enough. One failed test, and they decide it defines their entire academic ability. They do not consider other factors, such as the difficulty of the test, how they felt that day, or if they focused on the right material. Their conclusion is too broad, based only on that single outcome. This kind of thinking can stop someone from trying again because they already believe the outcome is certain. Failure. Think about a job interview. You prepare, you show up, you feel confident, but you do not get the job. An overgeneralization might make you say, I will never get a job. No one wants to hire me. You dismiss all your qualifications and previous successes. You ignore the fact that many people apply for one position, or that another candidate might have had a more specific skill set for that particular role. You leap to a conclusion that limits your future actions, making you less likely to apply for other jobs. In C. Relationships, overgeneralization is common. Someone goes on a first date and it does not go well. The person does not call back. Instead of accepting it as one incompatible match, they think, no one will ever like me. I will always be alone. This thought takes a single interaction and blows it up into a lifetime of loneliness. It ignores all the other people in the world, the countless possibilities for connection, and the fact that not every first date works out for anyone. This type of thinking can make a person shy away from new social situations, reinforcing their negative belief. A common phrase you hear with overgeneralization is the use of words like always, never, every, or nobody. For instance, my boss always gives me the worst projects. This statement likely exaggerates. Does the boss truly give you the worst projects every single time? Or did you get a difficult project once or twice, and you generalize that experience? Similarly, nobody understands what I am going through, takes individual feelings, and assumes a universal lack of empathy. This kind of language signals an overgeneralization. It takes a specific feeling or event and stretches it to cover all similar occurrences regardless of actual evidence. Overgeneralization affects how you see yourself, others, and the world. If you make a mistake, you might tell yourself, I am a complete failure. This statement takes one misstep and uses it to define your entire worth. It ignores all your accomplishments and strengths. This thinking can seriously impact your self-esteem, making you feel less capable and less confident. It creates a skewed reality where negative events outweigh all positive ones, trapping you in a cycle of self-doubt. Asking someone to prove that something doesn't exist or isn't true is a classic way to unfairly shift the burden of proof. It is a logical fallacy. Imagine a person claims there's an invisible, intangible pink unicorn living in their garage. They then challenge you to prove that it isn't there. How would you even begin to do that? You can search the garage, but if you find nothing, the person can simply say, well, it's invisible and intangible, so you wouldn't see or touch it anyway. The burden of proof in this scenario rests entirely on the person making the initial claim about the unicorn's existence. It's not up to you to disprove something for which no evidence has been presented. This tactic is often used in arguments where a person wants to avoid providing evidence for their own assertions. For example, consider a conspiracy theorist who states, the government is secretly controlling our thoughts through fluoride in the water. Prove they aren't. The individual has made an extraordinary claim, and it is their responsibility to provide evidence to support it. It's not the job of the listener to conduct an exhaustive investigation to demonstrate the absence of thought-controlling fluoride. The lack of evidence for the claim is not evidence of its truth. Another common scenario involves accusations. Someone might accuse a colleague of not contributing to a team project and then demand, prove you did do your part. In a healthy work environment, the accuser should present specific examples or evidence of the colleague's lack of contribution. The onus is on the person making the accusation to substantiate their claim, not on the accused to somehow prove a negative. How does one definitively prove they didn't omit something or didn't fail to act, especially if there's no record of the non-action? This creates an impossible standard of proof. This fallacy also appears in pseudoscientific claims. Someone might declare, "My new energy device works by harnessing interdimensional particles." You can't prove it doesn't work. Scientists operate on the principle that a hypothesis must be testable and falsifiable. If a claim cannot be disproven because it offers no verifiable mechanism or observable effects, then it falls outside the realm of scientific inquiry. The burden is always on the person proposing the new phenomenon or device to demonstrate its efficacy and mechanism through empirical evidence, not on others to demonstrate its non-existence or non-functionality. In legal contexts, the principle of innocent until proven guilty directly addresses this. The prosecution bears the burden of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove their innocence. They do not have to prove the negative, that they didn't commit the crime. The legal system places the burden squarely on the accuser to present sufficient evidence. To demand that the defendant prove they didn't commit a crime would be to place an impossible and unjust burden upon them. This would turn the entire legal process on its head, making it nearly impossible for anyone to avoid convictions simply because they could not prove a negative. Threats and fear tactics can convince people to agree. This method, called appeal to fear, makes someone support an idea by increasing their fear of other choices. When you use an appeal to fear, you present a scary outcome if a person does not follow your suggestion. Imagine a city council debates a new public safety budget. A council member argues for a massive increase in police funding. He says, "If we do not approve this budget, crime will surge. Our neighborhoods will become unsafe. Burglaries will rise. Your children will not walk to school without fear. You risk the safety of your family without this funding." The council member uses fear of crime to push for more money. He paints a picture of a dangerous city to make others agree to his funding proposal. He does not show data on crime rates or how the new funding directly impacts crime reduction. He just uses the threat of increased danger. Think about an advertising campaign for a home security system. The commercial shows a dark house at night. A shadowy figure moves outside. The narrator says, "Without our system, your home is vulnerable. Protect your valuables. Protect your loved ones. Install our security system today, or face the consequences." This ad does not focus on the features of the system. It focuses on the fear of a home invasion. It makes you feel unsafe without the product. The ad implies bad things will happen if you do not buy it. Consider a politician running for office. She claims her opponent's policies will destroy the economy. She states, "My opponent's tax plan will lead to job losses and widespread poverty. Businesses will close. Families will struggle to buy food. Vote for me to save our economy." This politician uses the fear of economic collapse to gain votes. She does not present a detailed economic analysis. She highlights the negative outcomes her opponent's plan supposedly causes. She offers herself as the only way to avoid these bad results. A manager tells his team, "If we do not hit these quarterly targets, we will face severe cutbacks. We might lose jobs. Your roles are at risk if we fail." The manager uses the threat of job loss and reduced resources to motivate his team. He wants them to work harder and achieve the targets. He does not explain the reasons for the difficult targets or offer support. He puts fear in their minds. In healthcare, a doctor might tell a patient, "If you do not take this medication, your condition will worsen. You could end up in the hospital. Your health will fail." The doctor aims to get the patient to follow the treatment plan by emphasizing the negative health consequences of not doing so. This tactic makes the patient act out of fear of getting sicker. It can be effective, but it still relies on fear. These examples show how people use fear to get others to agree. They highlight risks and negative outcomes to drive a decision. They create an urgent need to act a certain way to avoid something bad. Whataboutism happens when someone tries to dodge an argument by bringing up a different issue. Imagine you are in a meeting and your boss says, "Sales for your team are down this quarter. What is your plan to fix this?" Instead of addressing the sales figures, you respond, "What about Mark's team? Their customer satisfaction scores dropped last month. You are not answering the original question about your team's sales. You are shifting the focus to Mark's team, trying to deflect the criticism aimed at you. This tactic does not actually solve the problem at hand. It just moves the spotlight. For example, if a parent tells their child, "You did not clean your room like I asked," and the child replies, "What about my sister? Her room is even messier." The child uses whataboutism. The sister's messy room does not make the child's room clean or excuse the child from their chore. The parent wants to know about the child's room, not the sister's. Consider a public health official discussing the importance of vaccinations. Someone in the audience shouts, "What about all the chemicals in our food? Aren't those bad for us too?" The person uses whataboutism. While food quality is a valid concern, it has nothing to do with the safety and effectiveness of vaccines. The speaker wants to talk about vaccinations, but the other person wants to talk about something else entirely. In politics, you often hear whataboutism. One politician criticizes another for a scandal, saying, "You voted for that bill, which cost taxpayers millions." The accused politician might respond, "What about when your party raised taxes last year? That hurt people too." This response avoids addressing the specific bill and instead points to a past action by the other party. It creates a diversion, hoping people forget the original accusation. A common scenario occurs when a country faces criticism for human rights abuses. If another nation condemns them, the accused country might say, "What about the poverty in your country? You have many people living in difficult conditions." This is a classic whataboutism. The existence of poverty in one country does not negate human rights abuses in another. It attempts to create a false equivalence and distract from the actual human rights issues. Another example, a friend tells you, "You always arrive late when we make plans." You could respond, "What about when you forgot my birthday last year? That was worse." Your friend brought up your lateness, a specific behavior. You deflected by bringing up a different past event where your friend made a mistake. You did not address your lateness. You simply threw a different issue back at them. Whataboutism tries to undermine the validity of the initial criticism by suggesting hypocrisy or a double standard. It makes the conversation stray from the main point. The person using it hopes to shift the debate away from their own problematic behavior or a difficult subject they do not want to discuss. It does not resolve the original issue. It just creates a new one. Cherry-picking means you only show facts that help your case, and you hide anything that hurts it. Imagine a car salesperson telling you a specific car gets great gas mileage in the city. They might show you a report with excellent city fuel economy numbers. But what if that same car gets terrible gas mileage on the highway and they conveniently leave that part out? That's cherry-picking. They are picking the cherries, the good parts, and leaving the rest behind. Think about a company trying to sell a new health supplement. They might point to one small study where a few people felt better after taking it. They will promote that study heavily, maybe even using testimonials from those few individuals. What they won't tell you about are the 10 other studies that showed no benefit at all, or even worse, harmful side effects. They select only the evidence that makes their product look good, creating a misleading picture for consumers. This happens a lot in discussions about complex issues. Someone might argue that a certain economic policy is a huge success. They will present data showing job growth in one specific sector or an increase in exports. However, they might completely ignore rising national debt, stagnant wages for most workers, or a decline in other important industries. By focusing only on the positive data points, they are cherry-picking to support their claim that the policy is working, even if the overall economic picture is far more nuanced. Consider a student presenting a research project. They found several sources, some of which support their hypothesis, and others that contradict it. If they only include the sources that agree with their idea and leave out the conflicting ones, they are cherry-picking. Their report might look strong on the surface, but it's built on an incomplete and biased presentation of the facts. A good researcher looks at all the evidence, even the parts that challenge their initial thoughts. Even in everyday conversations, people cherry-pick. Your friend might tell you about a fantastic restaurant, highlighting the one amazing dish they had. They won't mention that the service was slow, the prices were high, or that their companion's meal was awful. They are picking the best part of their experience to share, creating a more positive impression than reality dictates. It's about selective storytelling, where you choose the details that paint the picture you want others to see, rather than the whole truth. It distorts reality by presenting a partial view, making it difficult for others to form a complete and accurate understanding. You get a skewed perspective because you are only seeing a carefully chosen segment of the available information. Flattery involves offering excessive compliments to someone, often with an insincere motive, to gain something from them. It is a subtle form of manipulation, a tactic used to influence behavior by appealing to a person's ego or desire for affirmation. The person delivering the flattery aims to create a positive impression, build a false sense of trust, or lower the target's defenses, making them more receptive to requests or suggestions. Imagine a salesperson who tells a customer, "You have an incredible eye for quality, and this limited edition watch truly reflects your sophisticated taste." The salesperson is not genuinely impressed by the customer's discernment. They simply want to close the sale. The compliment, though seemingly positive, serves as a tool to bypass the customer's critical thinking and encourage a purchase. The customer, feeling appreciated and validated, becomes less likely to scrutinize the actual value or necessity of the item. In a professional setting, a junior employee might constantly praise their boss's leadership skills, innovative ideas, and unwavering dedication. "Your vision for this project is simply brilliant, Sarah," the employee might say. "No one else could have come up with such a comprehensive strategy." This is not necessarily genuine admiration. The employee might use this flattery to curry favor, hoping for a promotion, a raise, or special treatment. The boss, if susceptible to such praise, may overlook the employee's actual performance shortcomings, focusing instead on the positive reinforcement. This creates a biased perception where the flatterer gains an unfair advantage. Another scenario involves a friend who frequently tells you how supportive and understanding you are. "You always know exactly what to say, and you're the only one I can truly rely on," they might tell you before asking for a significant favor, like borrowing a large sum of money or asking you to perform a difficult task for them. The compliments build a sense of obligation and loyalty, making it harder for you to refuse their request. The flattery makes you feel important and valued, blinding you to the possibility that your friend is using your goodwill for their own benefit. Flattery often works because it taps into universal human desires for acceptance, approval, and recognition. Everyone enjoys hearing positive things about themselves. When someone delivers exaggerated or insincere praise, it can create a temporary high, making the recipient feel good. This positive emotional response can then be leveraged by the flatterer to achieve their objectives. The danger lies in the ulterior motive. The compliments are not an end in themselves, but a means to an end. The flatterer seeks to manipulate the target's emotions and judgment, subtly guiding them towards a desired outcome. This form of manipulation can erode genuine relationships and lead to decisions that are not in the best interest of the flattered individual. Begging the question happens when you use the very thing you are trying to prove as evidence for it. It's like saying, "This book is great because it's a great book." You haven't actually given any new information or a real reason. You have just restated your main point in a slightly different way. This makes your argument circular and not very convincing. Imagine someone arguing, "Ghosts are real because I saw a ghost." The proof offered for ghosts existing is the sighting of a ghost. But if you are trying to convince someone ghosts are real, simply claiming to have seen one doesn't help if the person doubts ghosts exist in the first place. You are assuming the existence of ghosts to prove the existence of ghosts. Here is another example. A politician might say, "We need to cut taxes for the wealthy because it will stimulate the economy." When asked why it will stimulate the economy, they might reply, "Because wealthy people will invest more if they pay less taxes." The core claim is that cutting taxes for the wealthy stimulates the economy. The reason given for this is that wealthy people will invest more if they pay less taxes, which is essentially the same idea. The argument is circular. It does not provide an independent reason for the initial claim. Think about a conversation where someone says, "Smoking marijuana should be illegal because it is against the law." This statement offers, "It is against the law," as the reason for it should be illegal. But being illegal is the same as being against the law. The argument does not provide a separate moral or practical reason for the law. It simply states the law exists, and therefore it should exist. Consider a doctor telling a patient, "You have a fever because your temperature is high." While true, this does not explain why the patient has a fever. The high temperature is the fever. A helpful explanation would address the underlying cause of the fever, such as an infection, not simply reiterate the symptom as the cause. Another common instance is when someone states, "The Bible is true because it says it is true." The premise for the Bible's truthfulness is the Bible's own claim of truthfulness. For someone who already believes the Bible, this might make sense. But for someone who doubts its truth, this argument offers no independent verification. It does not provide external evidence or a logical reason for belief beyond the text itself. The argument assumes the very thing it sets out to prove, the Bible's truth. This fallacy often appears in debates about controversial topics where people hold strong beliefs. It can be hard to spot because the restatement often uses different words, making it sound like new information. But if you look closely, you will see that the premise and the conclusion are essentially the same idea, just repackaged. The argument does not move forward, it just spins in a circle. To avoid begging the question, you must provide independent reasons or evidence that are not simply a restatement of your main point. Your support for your claim must be distinct from the claim itself. Moral panic describes a widespread fear or anxiety about something that poses less of a threat than people believe. Think of it like this: a small wave on the beach gets reported as a tsunami. People then panic, demanding that officials build huge seawalls, even though the real danger is minimal. The media plays a big part, often taking a minor incident and making it sound like a major crisis. They highlight extreme cases, use dramatic language, and repeat the story until everyone believes the threat is real and immediate. This creates a public outcry, which politicians then use to their advantage. They step in, promising to solve the crisis, often by creating new laws or policies that restrict freedoms or target specific groups. Consider the satanic panic of the 1980s. People worried that widespread satanic cults were abusing children in daycare centers. News reports, often based on false accusations or coerced confessions, painted a terrifying picture. Stories of secret rituals, hidden tunnels, and child sacrifice spread like wildfire. Parents pulled their children from daycare, and many daycare workers faced wrongful arrests and convictions. The actual evidence of widespread satanic ritual abuse was almost non-existent. However, the fear was so intense that it reshaped public perception and even influenced legal outcomes, despite the lack of credible proof. This panic targeted innocent people, particularly those working in childcare, and caused immense damage to their lives and reputations. The focus shifted from understanding the complexities of child abuse to chasing a phantom threat. Another example is the widespread fear of stranger danger that swept communities. While parents rightly teach children to be cautious, the narrative often focused on rare, highly sensationalized cases of abduction by unknown individuals. This led to an exaggerated sense of risk for children simply playing outside or walking to school. Communities sometimes implemented strict curfews for minors, limited where children could go, or pressured schools to adopt zero-tolerance policies that penalized even minor infractions. The panic fueled a perception that every stranger was a potential predator, making everyday interactions fraught with suspicion. It created a climate where children had less freedom to explore and learn independence, all based on an amplified perception of danger, when in reality, Most threats to children come from people they know, not anonymous strangers. The intense focus on stranger abductions overshadowed efforts to address more common forms of harm. The appeal to novelty is a common way of thinking where people assume something is superior just because it's new. This doesn't mean that new things are always bad, but their newness alone doesn't guarantee they are better. It's a way of looking at things that can lead to poor choices if we don't think more deeply. Consider a company that launches a new and improved laundry detergent. The marketing campaign highlights its brand new formula, its advanced cleaning agents, and its innovative scent. A consumer seeing this might immediately think, "This must be better than my old detergent because it's new." They buy it, expecting a superior clean, even if their old detergent worked perfectly well. The decision is based on the detergent's novelty, not on any actual evidence of its improved performance. Perhaps the old formula was just as effective, or even more so, for their needs. Think about software updates. Many people eagerly download the latest version of their phone's operating system as soon as it's released. They might do this because it promises new features and a fresh interface. Sometimes these updates genuinely improve performance or add useful functions. Other times, the new version might introduce bugs, slow down the device, or remove features users found helpful. The desire to have the newest version often outweighs a careful consideration of whether the update truly benefits the user. The appeal of novelty makes people assume the new software is inherently better, rather than waiting for reviews or seeing how it performs in the real world. Another scenario plays out in the fashion industry. Each season, designers release new collections. Trends shift, and what was popular last year might be considered outdated this year. Consumers often feel pressured to buy the latest styles, believing that new clothing is inherently more fashionable or desirable. A shirt from last season, still in perfect condition and perfectly suitable, might be replaced by a new one simply because it represents the current trend. The belief here is that new equals better, even when the older item still serves its purpose and looks good. The appeal of novelty drives consumption based on perceived newness rather than actual utility or aesthetic improvement. This way of thinking also pops up in the world of health and wellness. A new diet plan or exercise fad emerges, promising revolutionary results. It's marketed as the latest scientific breakthrough or the next big thing. People might abandon their current effective routines to jump on the newest trend, assuming its novelty makes it superior. They might not research the claims, look for long-term studies, or consider if the new approach is sustainable for them. The allure of something new, something that hasn't been tried before, can lead people to overlook established proven methods. It's not just about products. Even in ideas or policies, the appeal to novelty can be powerful. A new political proposal might gain support simply because it's a fresh approach or a new vision, even if its details are untested or its potential consequences are not fully understood. The idea that new automatically means better can overshadow a thorough evaluation of the proposal's merits and risks. This pattern shows how deeply the appeal to novelty influences our decisions across many aspects of life, often without us even realizing it. You encounter the appeal to wealth fallacy when someone claims an argument is right, simply because the person making it is rich or successful. This line of reasoning assumes that financial prosperity or high achievement automatically grants validity to one's statements, regardless of the actual evidence or logic presented. It is a faulty way to think because wealth has no direct connection to the truth or soundness of an argument. Think of a scenario where a famous billionaire, known for their business acumen, starts talking about climate change. They might argue that a specific environmental policy is bad for the economy and therefore bad for the planet. An appeal to wealth would occur if someone then said, "Well, they're a billionaire. They must know what they're talking about. Their success proves their point." This is a fallacy. Their wealth indicates financial success, not necessarily expertise in environmental science or economic policy. Their business success does not make their climate change argument true. The argument needs to stand on its own merits, with evidence and logical reasoning, not on the size of their bank account. Consider another example. A highly successful entrepreneur who built a company from the ground up insists that their unique management style is the only effective way to run a business. They say, "Look at my company's profits. That proves my methods are the best." While their profits show success, it does not mean their management style works for every company or that it is the absolute best. Many factors contribute to a company's success beyond a single management approach. Other companies with different styles also achieve success. The entrepreneur's wealth validates their financial achievement, not the universal applicability or inherent superiority of their management philosophy. This fallacy often plays on our societal respect for wealth and success. We often see wealthy individuals as having superior knowledge or insight, believing their financial triumphs extend to all areas of thought. This can lead us to accept their opinions without critical examination. For instance, a wealthy art collector might declare a specific painting is a masterpiece, and others accept it without question simply because of the collector's status. Their wealth gives them influence and perhaps access to rare art, but it does not make them an infallible judge of artistic merit. True artistic value depends on many subjective and objective criteria, not just the purchasing power of one individual. The appeal to wealth also appears in political discussions. A candidate might argue that their past financial success in business qualifies them to make sound economic decisions for a country. Supporters might say, "They built a fortune, so they can fix our economy." While business experience can be valuable, running a national economy involves complexities far beyond individual business ventures. It requires understanding public policy, social welfare, international relations, and diverse economic theories, not just personal profit generation. Their personal wealth does not automatically equip them with all the necessary knowledge or the best solutions for a nation's economic challenges. In everyday life, you might hear this when someone buys an expensive item and then claims it is inherently better just because of its price. This car cost a fortune, so it's obviously the best car on the market. The high price reflects marketing, brand perception, and features, but it does not guarantee objective superiority in performance, reliability, or value for every buyer. A cheaper car might perform better in certain aspects or be more reliable. The cost indicates a market value, not an inherent truth about the product's quality. The appeal to wealth is a smokescreen. It distracts from the actual substance of an argument by focusing on the arguer's financial standing or perceived success. To avoid falling for this fallacy, always ask, what evidence supports this claim? Is the argument logical? Does the arguer's wealth truly make their statement more credible in this specific context? Separate the person's financial status from the validity of their argument. When someone presents you with only two options as if they are the only choices, they create a false dichotomy. This happens even when other possibilities exist. It forces you to pick between two things, ignoring all the other ways you can act or think. Consider a company that says, "We either cut employee salaries by 10% or we close down the entire department." This statement presents a false dichotomy. It suggests only two grim outcomes. In reality, other options might be available. The company could explore reducing executive bonuses, finding new revenue streams, renegotiating supplier contracts, or even seeking short-term loans. By presenting only two choices, the company tries to make its chosen action seem like the only sensible path, pushing employees to accept the pay cut. This tactic limits discussion and prevents creative problem-solving. Another example appears in politics. A politician might declare, "You are either with us or you are against us." This statement creates a false dichotomy. It suggests that there are no neutral positions, no nuanced views, and no middle ground. In truth, many people might agree with some aspects of a policy but disagree with others. They might support the general goal but oppose the specific methods. This kind of rhetoric aims to polarize the audience, forcing individuals to pick a side rather than encouraging open debate and compromise. It simplifies complex issues into an us versus them narrative, shutting down legitimate dissent or alternative proposals. Think about a parent telling a child, "You either eat all your vegetables or you get no dessert." This is a common false dichotomy. While the parent wants the child to eat vegetables, they present only two outcomes. Other possibilities exist. The child could eat some vegetables, try a different vegetable, or have a smaller portion of dessert. This approach uses an ultimatum to get compliance, rather than fostering a healthy eating habit or finding a solution that satisfies both parties. It ignores the child's preferences or potential dietary needs. In a business meeting, a project, manager might state, "We must launch this product by next month, or we will lose our competitive edge." This also creates a false dichotomy. It implies speed is the only factor determining success. Other factors, like quality, market readiness, or proper testing, might be equally or more important. The team could consider a phased launch, a slight delay to refine the product, or even a different marketing strategy. The manager's statement pressures the team into a rushed timeline, potentially leading to errors or a poor product launch, all because they did not consider other viable options. A student might feel, "I must get perfect grades, or I am a failure." This is a personal false dichotomy. It sets up an impossible standard where anything less than perfection equals complete failure. Many different levels of achievement exist between perfect grades and being a failure. Good grades, passing grades, or even learning a lot without top marks are all valid outcomes. This mindset can lead to extreme stress and anxiety as the student ignores the broad spectrum of success and personal growth that occurs outside of academic perfection. It limits their view of their own worth to a single metric. Groupthink occurs when a group of people makes decisions that prioritize harmony and conformity over critical thinking and individual judgment. This means that individuals within the group often suppress their own doubts, dissenting opinions, or alternative ideas to avoid conflict, maintain group cohesion, or simply go along with what seems to be the majority view. The desire to fit in or avoid being seen as a troublemaker becomes stronger than the drive to make the best possible decision. Imagine a team at a company tasked with developing a new product. The team leader, a highly respected figure, proposes a certain design concept. Several team members privately have concerns about the design's feasibility or market appeal. However, nobody speaks up. One engineer thinks, "Everyone else seems to agree, so I must be missing something. Or maybe my idea is stupid." Another marketing specialist considers voicing a different strategy, but decides against it, fearing that challenging the leader will make them seem unsupportive or difficult. This silence creates an illusion of unanimity. Because no one speaks against the proposed design, the group moves forward with it, even if it has significant flaws that could have been identified and corrected with open discussion. The team avoids conflict in the short term, but the company suffers from a flawed product later. Another scenario involves a town council discussing a new zoning ordinance. A vocal majority of council members express strong support for a particular change that promises quick economic benefits. One council member has thoroughly researched the potential negative long-term environmental impacts, and an expert even sent an email outlining these risks. However, the council member observes the overwhelming enthusiasm for the proposal and the dismissive attitude towards any cautionary remarks. They decide to remain silent, fearing that raising their concerns will label them as obstructionist or anti-progress by their peers and the public. The illusion of unanimity takes hold, and the ordinance passes without a full airing of its potential downsides. In this case, the town might gain short-term economic gains, but faces significant environmental problems down the road because one person did not voice an important opinion. The pressure to conform can be subtle. It might be the way people nod in agreement when a powerful person speaks, or the quiet shift in conversation when someone briefly expresses a differing view. Members might start to rationalize the group's decisions, even if they have internal doubts. They might dismiss outside information that contradicts the group's chosen path. For example, if a company is set on a particular expansion plan and an external market report suggests it is too risky, the group might dismiss the report as overly cautious or not understanding our unique strengths. This collective rationalization reinforces the group's belief in its own correctness and invulnerability. This phenomenon is not about malicious intent. People do not deliberately make bad decisions. Instead, groupthink happens because the social dynamics of the group override clear objective thinking, the desire for acceptance, the avoidance of isolation, and the belief that the group is inherently right can lead smart, capable individuals to suppress their critical faculties and make choices that, in hindsight, appear irrational or even disastrous. Equivocation tricks us with words that have more than one meaning. It makes a bad argument look good by switching between those meanings. Think of it like a magician's trick, but with words instead of cards. The arguer uses a word in one sense, then subtly shifts to another sense as the argument progresses. This shift makes the conclusion seem to follow logically, even though it does not. Consider this example. All trees have bark. My dog barks. Therefore, my dog is a tree. This argument is a classic case of equivocation. The word bark has two distinct meanings. In the first sentence, bark refers to the outer layer of a tree. In the second sentence, barks refers to the sound a dog makes. The arguer pretends these two different meanings are the same. This makes the argument seem to work, but it does not. A dog is clearly not a tree. The trick lies in the ambiguous word. Here is another scenario. Imagine a company advertises a natural juice. They say, "Our juice is natural because it contains no artificial flavors or preservatives." Later, you discover the juice is mostly water and corn syrup. While water and corn syrup are natural in the sense they come from nature, the consumer likely understands natural to mean wholesome or unprocessed. The company equivocates on the word natural. They use one meaning of natural to appeal to health-conscious consumers while relying on a different, less appealing meaning to justify the ingredients. The company makes its product sound better than it is by playing with the meaning of natural. Politicians often use equivocation. A politician might say, "I support freedom." This sounds good, but what does freedom mean in this context? It could mean economic freedom, personal freedom, or freedom from government interference. If the politician then advocates for a policy that limits certain personal freedoms, they have equivocated. They used the general appeal of freedom to gain support, then applied a specific, narrower meaning to their policy. The audience believes they support the broad concept of freedom, while the politician acts on a more limited definition. Another example. Only man is rational. No woman is a man. Therefore, no woman is rational. This argument equivocates on the word man. In the first premise, man refers to humankind, encompassing both men and women. In the second premise, man refers to a male human. By switching the meaning, the argument reaches a false and offensive conclusion. The seemingly logical flow hides the subtle shift in meaning. Spotting equivocation requires careful attention to word meanings. When an argument seems too simple or too good to be true, check for words that might have multiple interpretations. Ask yourself if the arguer uses the same word consistently with the same meaning throughout the argument. If the meaning shifts, the argument likely relies on equivocation, making it unsound. The argument's strength comes from the hidden switch of meaning, not from its logic.